Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to transport you to a very specific moment in time and a specific place, actually.
Right.
It's March 2026, and we are standing, well, metaphorically speaking, of course, in Hargeisa.
Yeah, there's a gathering taking place there right now as we speak.
Exactly. It's an iftar dinner. You've got diplomats, political heavyweights, a grieving family. There are prayers being said. But the atmosphere, it isn't just solemn. It's really charged with this very specific lingering frustration.
It's a heaviness, really, a heaviness that comes from entirely unanswered questions. Because we're looking at an event that marks exactly 2 years since a death that, well, it didn't just break a family's heart, it actually sent shockwaves through the entire region's geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, it completely froze diplomatic relations. It reignited all these old tensions in the Horn of Africa. And we're talking about the case of Abdinasir Muse Dahable.
Widely known as Dahable.
Dahable, yes. And if you haven't heard this name before, you really need to understand who we're dealing with here, because this wasn't just some random bystander who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Not at all.
Dahable was a high achiever in literally every sense of the word. I mean, he was a Chevening alumnus, which, if you know anything about global scholarships, is a massive deal.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
the Chevening Scholarship is the UK government's global scholarship program. It is notoriously competitive.
Right.
So being selected for that, it effectively stamps you as a future leader. It says you're someone with very high potential who's going to return home and actually make a difference.
Exactly. He's exactly the kind of guy you want rebuilding a country's infrastructure.
Right.
And on top of that, he was a member of the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO.
Which is a specialized agency of the United Nations.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial detail to keep in mind as we go through the source material today.
Yeah, definitely.
He was an international civil servant. He's working in a field that is fundamentally about safety, about neutrality, and connection. His literal job was to help planes fly safely.
Right. So the mission for today's deep dive is to understand how a guy with that kind of resume, an aviation expert working for a global UN body, ends up dead in a room in Mogadishu, sparking a political firestorm between Somaliland and Somalia that is, frankly, still burning 2 years later.
Yes.
We're going to unpack the conflicting narratives. We're going to look at the forensic evidence, which, fair warning, is pretty brutal.
Right.
And we're going to look at why this case is still officially labeled as unsolved.
And what we're really exploring here is the intersection of justice and sovereignty. Because when you dive into the sources we have today, it becomes incredibly clear that for many people involved, this isn't just a murder investigation. It's morphed into a symbol of a much larger national struggle.
Absolutely. So let's start with the man himself. We mentioned the ICAO connection. Dahable was working for their team in Mogadishu. Could you give us a little context there? Because usually people from Hargeisa in Somaliland might be, well, hesitant, to say the least, to work in Mogadishu given the political history.
That's entirely right. The context is so important here. So the ICAO had relocated its main office to the Somali capital, Mogadishu, back in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Prior to that, operations were actually often handled from Nairobi. But the move was part of this broader effort to normalize operations within Somalia itself. And Dahable was assigned there as part of that mission.
Right.
He was there to work,
Mm-hmm.
to contribute to civil aviation infrastructure. By all accounts in the sources, he was a consummate professional doing a highly prestigious job in a very challenging environment.
He was basically crossing a divide in a way, using his technical skills for the broader good of the whole region's infrastructure.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which makes what happens next even more tragic.
It does. And then we get to the date that changed everything. February 18th, 2024. Dahable is found dead in his room in Mogadishu.
Yeah.
Now, usually when a death is reported in a volatile zone like that, you might get a vague, cause of death to be determined, or maybe gets framed early on as a tragic accident. But here, the early reports were immediately sounding alarm bells.
Extremely alarming. The initial reports coming out of Mogadishu cited visible physical injuries.
Right.
So immediately, the conversation shifted from tragic loss to foul play. This wasn't a natural death, it wasn't a heart attack or a stroke, and it clearly wasn't an accident. The red flags went up instantly.
And the reaction from Somaliland, where Dahable is from, was just incredibly swift. The government there, they didn't mince words at all. They immediately called it a cruel and deliberate act. They were condemning this before an autopsy was even fully public.
Which really speaks to the immediate suspicion that exists between these two entities.
Yeah.
There was a deep-seated lack of trust there. But the condemnation wasn't just political posturing. It turned out to be completely based on the grim reality of the state of his body. The family and the authorities in Hargeisa, they knew something was terribly wrong right away.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And I do have to give a warning to you listening right now. This next part gets heavy. We have to discuss the specific forensic details of what happened to Dahables.
We do.
It is graphic, but it's necessary to understand why the word torture is so central to the story. We really can't gloss over this. We want to understand the anger at that memorial in 2026.
It is the aha moment of the investigation, unfortunately in the darkest possible way.
Mm-mm.
The body was transferred from Mogadishu to Hargeisa, where a post-mortem examination was conducted at the hospital there.
Right.
The person overseeing this was Dr. Abdirahman Mohammed Osman. He's the Director General of the hospital.
And this wasn't just a quick glance in the morgue either. The source material specifies they conducted a very thorough 48-hour examination.
Correct. They took their time to meticulously document everything, and the findings were highly specific. Dr. Osman stated that the primary cause of death was strangulation.
But it wasn't just that he was choked, right?
No. The report specifies a thick rope was used. And here is the detail that is truly chilling. The medical evidence suggests the pressure was held around his neck for approximately 5 to 7 minutes.
5 to 7 minutes. I really want to pause on that because in movies, strangulation is always shown as this quick thing, like 10 seconds and it's over. But in reality, 5 minutes. That is an absolute eternity.
It implies a deliberate, prolonged act. This wasn't some split-second struggle that went wrong or a panic move.
No.
Keeping pressure on someone's windpipe for that long takes physical stamina and intent. It highly suggests an interrogation or a slow execution rather than a robbery gone bad.
And that wasn't the only injury noted in the report.
No, unfortunately not. The list of injuries reads like an assault sheet. The doctor reported a fractured right jaw, a shattered left cheekbone, severe damage to the left eye.
A shattered cheekbone. I mean, that takes massive force.
It does. It implies significant blunt force trauma. And perhaps most importantly, the report noted numerous defensive wounds.
Defensive wounds, which usually mean the victim was conscious and fighting back.
Exactly. Those are the marks on the arms or hands that tell you the victim tried to block the blows. He was struggling. When you combine a shattered cheekbone, eye damage, and defensive wounds with that level of prolonged strangulation, you are looking at what Dr. Osman explicitly called severe trauma, consistent with torture.
There is another detail here that Dr. Osman brought up in the sources, and this one really makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It's about the room where he was found in Mogadishu. This is where the story shifts from a brutal murder to something that looks distinctly like a cover-up.
Yes, this is the allegation of tampering.
Yeah.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle. Dr. Osman claimed that the body had been tampered with before it was even transferred to Hargeisa for the autopsy. Specifically, he pointed out that the electricity to the air conditioner and the refrigerator in Dahable's room had been cut.
Cut, like someone went in and turned off the breakers.
Or entirely severed the connection. The point is, the cooling systems were purposefully disabled, and they had been cut for several days, according to the doctor's analysis of the scene and the state of the body. Now, think about why someone would do that in a hot coastal climate like Mogadishu.
Because heat accelerates decomposition.
Precisely. The implication Dr. Osman is making is that this was a highly calculated attempt to accelerate decomposition.
Right.
If you speed up the decay of the body, you compromise the forensic evidence, you make it much harder for pathologists to determine the exact time of death, you degrade DNA evidence under the fingernails, and you mask bruising patterns.
So the argument here is that whoever did this didn't just want him dead. They wanted to erase the story of exactly how he died. They wanted a body that was too far gone to tell a tale.
Which suggests a level of calculation and access that goes way beyond a random street criminal. You need time to do that. You need to know that no one is coming to check on the room for a while.
Wow. Okay, so we have a brutalized body, clear evidence of torture, and allegations of a sophisticated cover-up at the scene involving the environment itself. Fast forward to today, March 2026. We're back at this memorial in Hargeisa. 2 years have passed. You'd think, or maybe hope, that in 2 years, with international pressure, with the ICAO involved, there would be some answers.
And yet, the central theme of this memorial is that justice has absolutely not been served.
Right.
The host of the event was Bashawil Haji Omar, the former Somaliland ambassador, and his message to the crowd was very clear. He said, 2 years have passed, and he has yet to receive justice.
But I noticed something really interesting in the language they are using to describe Dahable now in these sources. It's shifted. In the beginning, he was a victim. Now, he's almost a symbol. Listen to this quote from Bashawil. He said, "He did not die for any wrongdoing, but for the nationhood of Somaliland."
That is a fascinating and critical shift in the narrative. And we see this happen frequently in geopolitical conflicts where an individual's death is co-opted, and I don't mean that cynically, but descriptively, into the larger national story.
Yeah.
Dahable's father, Muse Abdirahman, was there too. He told the attendees that his son died for Somaliland sovereignty.
And Mohammed Kahin Ahmed, the chairman of the Crimea Party, he went even further. He called Dahable an asset who was killed because of the Somaliland cause.
Right.
And I want to pause here for a second and just remind you, listening, we are looking at this source material objectively. We are not taking sides on the political tensions between Somalia and Somaliland. We are simply reporting how these leaders are framing this event in the documents we have.
Absolutely. We are strictly analyzing the narratives presented in the sources. And what this narrative means is that in the eyes of his family and the political leadership in Hargeisa, Dahable wasn't killed because of a personal dispute, a debt, or a robbery.
Right, it's bigger than that to them.
They view his death as a targeted assassination based purely on his identity and his origin. He represents the Somalilander working in Mogadishu, and his death is seen as the ultimate price paid for that underlying tension.
It really elevates the stakes entirely. If he's framed as a martyr for sovereignty, then the lack of justice isn't just a legal failure, it's a political insult. It feels like an attack on the nation itself.
Exactly. It reinforces the narrative of us versus them. If the justice system in Mogadishu fails to solve the murder of a Somalilander, it validates the argument that Somalilanders are not safe or protected there, regardless of their international status or UN affiliation.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Who actually did it? Because usually in these unsolved mysteries, we're dealing with shadows. We say unknown assailants. But in this deep dive, looking at the reports, we actually have names. We have specific allegations that have surfaced.
We do. And again, we have to be very precise here because these are allegations reported in the source material derived from intelligence leaks. They are not court verdicts.
Important distinction.
Very important. But they are incredibly specific, which is quite rare in these cases. A confidential intelligence source came forward with information linking the killing directly to officers within NISA.
NISA being Somalia's National Intelligence and Security Agency.
Correct, the state intelligence apparatus. The very people who are supposed to ensure national security.
And they named names.
They did. The source identified an officer named Hassan Dahir as one of 2 individuals believed to be involved in the physical act, the torture, and the strangulation itself.
Okay.
But the allegation went much higher than just a rogue officer.
How high?
The allegation is that they were acting under the authority of the NISA director himself, Mohammed Salad.
Wow, okay, let's just let that sink in. You have allegations pointing not to a gang, not to a terrorist cell like Al-Shabaab, but to the intelligence agency of the host country, implicating the director and specific officers.
It creates a massive paradox. It's the classic fox guarding the henhouse scenario. If the allegation is that the state security apparatus is responsible for the murder, who exactly conducts the investigation?
NISA.
Right, NISA. The police who work hand in glove with NISA.
That totally explains the tampering detail we talked about earlier.
Yes.
If the intelligence agency is involved, they would absolutely have the access to cut the power, to secure the room, to ensure no one asks any questions for a few days while the body decomposes.
Exactly. It fits the profile of a state-sanctioned action rather than a random crime. And that explains the silence. Because despite these specific names floating around, despite the intelligence leaks, what has actually happened in the last 2 years?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. No publicly announced prosecutions, no official resolution, just a void.
And that void is currently filled with frustration. You have former Somalia Information Minister Osman Dub calling it an act of cruelty. You have activists like Hamza Awal calling for a memorial monument to be built. They are trying to physically cement his memory because the legal system hasn't provided any closure at all.
And that's why the memorial in Hargeisa is so incredibly significant. It's a way of saying we haven't forgotten and we won't let you forget. When you have a case involving an employee of a UN agency dead in a secure zone, or at least a zone that should be secure with allegations against state actors, for it to go quiet for 2 years is telling in itself.
It really is. And it makes you wonder about the position of the ICAO in all this. I mean, they're a UN body. They have diplomatic weight. But they're also guests in the country.
It's a very delicate balance. If an international organization pushes too hard against a host government's intelligence service, they risk being expelled entirely.
Yeah.
And the ICAO's mission is to keep the airspace safe. They might find themselves caught between their duty to their staff and their operational mandate in the region.
So Dahable was laid to rest in Gebeli back on February 25th, 2024. But as we look at the situation 2 years later, it really feels like the funeral was just the beginning of the struggle, not the end.
It marked the beginning of the quest for justice, as the sources repeatedly call it. The family, the diplomats, the politicians gathered for that iftar there keeping the flame alive. But the barrier they're up against is massive. They're up against a wall of silence that seems to be reinforced by the state itself.
It's the ultimate cold case, but the temperature is kept high by the politics.
Precisely. And for you, the listener, the takeaway here is how an individual life, a guy who studied hard, got the prestigious Chevening Scholarship, worked for the ICAO, did everything right, can get swept up into the machinery of conflict. He is no longer just Abdinasir Muse Dahable, the aviation expert. He is now a symbol of the Somaliland cause.
It leaves you with a really heavy feeling. We started this by talking about a memorial gathering, and usually memorials are about closure. They are about saying goodbye. But this one feels like it's entirely about resistance.
Resistance against silence. Resistance against the complete erasure of the truth.
So here is a provocative thought to leave you with today, and I'd really love for you to mull this over on your own. We live in a world where global professionals move around constantly. Humanitarians, UN workers, technical experts like Dahable. We tend to assume there's a shield of immunity or at least some basic safety that comes with that international badge. We think the blue UN vest is bulletproof, metaphorically speaking.
We do. We assume the international rules apply everywhere.
But when that shield is broken in a conflict zone, and the evidence suggests state-level involvement, when the very people who are supposed to be providing the security are the ones holding the rope, where does the family go? Where does the justice come from?
That is the crucial question. When the justice system is the prime suspect, who polices the police? Who actually holds the state accountable?
A question that, for Dahable's family, remains unanswered 2 years later. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep asking the why behind the headlines.
Until next time.